All right, guys. So we're going to start on 312 because 311 and 312 and what we're doing tomorrow are all this revolving around the same content. So what we did, or we're going to do Thursday, 311 and 312 are still doing the same thing. It's just different versions or different forms of the problem. Now, what we're doing is factoring quadratics, because that's what we're covering and what we're talking about is factoring quadratics. Now, there are several main steps whenever we factor a quadratic. The first step is greatest common factor. We look to see if there is a greatest common factor. So if we look at the first problem here, the first main step we're looking at is determining, is there a greatest common factor? Is there something that will go into all three terms? Eight is the greatest common factor here because 8 will go into all three terms, so we can factor it out. Now we factor 8 out of 8x squared, we're left with minus. If we factor 8 out of 56, x plus. If we factor 8 out of 48, we're left with 6. And that's our first main step, is to determine if there's a greatest common factor. There won't always be one, but if there is, we want to pull it out. The second step is to write two sets of parentheses with three spaces. Two sets of parentheses with three spaces. So we will keep the greatest common factor there. We'll have two sets of parentheses with 30 spaces. Any questions on this so far? Now that brings us to our third step, which is signs. Because in each one of these parentheses, there's going to be a sign in the middle. It's either going to be positive or negative. Now, if the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. The signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is positive, then the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. The other case is if third term is negative, and I'll move out of the way here in a second. Is negative, the signs are opposite. So if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So the only time that we're really looking at the sign of the middle term is if the third term is positive. Okay, so here the third term is positive. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. And our middle term is negative. So our signs are negative and negative. Questions on this so far? That brings us to the fourth step, is to find the factors of the first and third term. And I'll go on and put our last step, which is check. Our last step is to check it, to make sure we got the correct formula. So we look back up here. Our first term is x squared. So what two things multiply together to give us x squared? Well, because x times x is x squared, yes? So that's the first term. Now we need to find the factors of 6. 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? And again, with this here, we're not going to necessarily pick the correct one first. We could, but again, we just pick one of the sets of factors and plug it in. And we try it. Because again, our last step is to check, yes? Now, according to most math textbooks, what they'll tell us to do is that we're going to need to multiply x times x and x times negative 6, and then negative 1 times x and negative 1 times negative 6. But where did we get x and x from? X squared. They're the factors of x squared, yes? So will these first two spots always get back to our first term? Yeah, because that's where we got them from, yes? So is there any reason for me to multiply this first one and first one? No. How about the 1 and 6? Where do we get them from? So will they give us back to that there? So the spot we're really focused on is that middle term, because that's going to be the one that changes depending on the setup. So really, instead of doing all those, really we can focus on the x times negative 6 and the negative 1 times x. Because the other one's x times x is x squared. Negative 1 times negative 6 is positive 6. They get us back there. Now x times negative 6 is negative 6x. Negative 1 times x is negative x. And negative 6 minus x is negative 7x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. So those are our factors. Questions on this here? Let's look at the next one. 14x squared plus 31x plus 15. Is there a greatest common factor? No. So there's not always going to be one. But if we do find one, we want to factor it out. Since there's not one, we'll move on to step 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now the reason I have you all do this 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces is so that you have spacing. Because it's hard to judge exactly how far apart we need those parentheses, so putting those 3 spots kind of gives us a spacing guide. Now we can move on to step 2, or step 3, the signs. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So positive third term, so they're both positive. Takes us to the third step, finding the factors of the first and third term. So we can look at 14x squared first. Well, we have x squared, don't we? So what is the only way we can get x squared is with x and x. If there's only one set of possible factors for it, x squared is x and x, go on and just throw them in. If we got 3, well, the only setup is 3 and 1. Just throw them in. One and 14, 2 and 7. Now here we have 2. Which one do we want to try first? What do y'all think? We can do 1 and 14. So we can do 14 and 1. We don't have to write 1x. We can just leave it as x. Now 15. 1 and 15, or which one do we want to try first? 1 and 15. And again, how we do these is, again, we can put them in, then we check it to see if we get it right. And again, just like with the last one, 14x times x is 14x squared. 1 times 5 is still 15, so we're checking this middle term. 14x times 15 is going to be, oh, not 70. That's not 70. No, the 70 is too small for that. Because 14 times 15, because 169, 210x plus x is 211x. So that doesn't work. But what we could do is switch the 1 and 15. So we can say 15 and 14x plus 15 times x plus 1. 14x times 1 is 14x. Plus 15 times x is, so it gives us too small. So what we could do is we could switch to 3 and 5. And 5. Now 14 times 5 is 70x. Plus 3x is 73x. So again, we're just trying these out.
Maybe do we need to change our x values?
And 5 and 3 is not going to work either. So we could try switching the 14. 2. 2 and 7, yes. 2 and 7. And we can try this here. Now 2x times 3 is 6x. 5 times 7x is plus 35x, which gives us 41x. Now there's only one other possible setup for this here. That's switching the 5 and 3. Now 2x times 5 is 10x. 3 times 7x is, which gives us, is that what we wanted?
Yes.
So sometimes we'll get it on the first try. Sometimes it takes more. But again, it's really plugging these in and checking them to see which one works. Now, the more that you do these, the more of these that you do, the better you're going to get at seeing what the possible answer is. Does that make sense? So really, a lot of this is just repetition with these here. (2x squared minus 7x plus 5). Is there a greatest common factor between these three? No. So we'll have our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So here the third term is. So the third term is positive, so the signs are the same, and they match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So they'll be negative and negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, with x squared, we have x and x. Now the factors of 2 are 2 and 1, or 1 and 2, yes? So we just need to figure out a place to put the 2, because 1x, or just x, is the same. So we don't necessarily have to write the 1 in for it. Now the factors of 5 are 5 and. So which one do we want to put first, 5 or 1? And the last thing we need to do is, so 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 2 minus 5. Is that what we want? So those are the factors. So some of the times we can get it on the first try. Sometimes it takes a few more. Questions on this here? Questions on any of this so far? 3x squared minus 14x plus 8. Is there a greatest common factor? No. So we'll have two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now the 8 in this case is positive. The third term is positive. So the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. So positive and negative means these are both negative. Questions on this so far? Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, the first term is 3x squared. Well, we know we'll have x and, because that's the only real way that this will work with the factors of x squared. Now the factors of 3 are 3 times 1. Which set of parentheses do we want to put the 3 in? First one. Now the factors of 8 are 1 and 8, or which one do we want to try first? 2 and 4. Which one do we want to put first? Okay. Yeah, we can flip it. Two and 4, and we can check this here. 3x times negative 4 is negative. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x, which gives us negative 14x. Is that what we wanted? Yes. Yes. And that's it. Questions on any of this here? Do you feel pretty comfortable with these? This one? So we can look at this one here. So, is there a greatest common factor between these 3 here? No. So we start off with 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. So if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Yes? So the third term is negative. So the signs are? Does it matter what the middle term is for this one? No, because this is all about the third term. The third term, if it's negative, the signs are opposite. The only time we really look at the sign of the middle term is if the third term is positive. Now we look at the factors of the first and third term. Well, 4x squared, we know we're going to have what? X and x with the x squared, yes? Variables in the first term spot, so first set blank will have x and x. Mm-hmm. 2 and 2. Now we need to look at the factors of 5, which is 1 and 5. So we can do 5 and the last thing we can do is check. Well, 2x and 2x still give us 4x squared. 5 and 1 still give us 5. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. 5 times 2x is plus 10x, which gives us a positive 8x. 10 minus 2 would give us 8. So we can flip it, but would flipping the 1 and 5 really change anything? Yeah, it would make it negative 8x because the 2x would become positive and the 5x would be 10x would become negative. So we can switch the 2 and 2 with 1 and 4. Where do we want to put the 4 first? Okay. And we can try this here. X times negative 1 is negative x. 5 times 4x is plus 20x. And negative x plus 20x is positive 19x. Is that what we wanted? It's supposed to be negative. We're almost there, yes? So what would be an easy way to fix it? Yeah. Because if we make the 1 negative, and this one over here, so if we made the plus 1 and make it minus 5, it's going to fix it. Because now x times 1 is positive x instead of negative x. Negative 5 times 4x is negative 20x, which will give us negative 19. So on some of these here, especially when the number in front of x is not the same, it's easier to flip the sign than it is to try to flip the terms. Because if we didn't flip the sign, the terms, if we tried to flip the terms for here and leave it as negative plus minus, we would have had to switch 4x and x here and 1 and 5 to get there. We had to flip 2 different things, where if we just flip the sign, we're just changing 1. And luckily, when you change the sign, to change this from negative to positive is just drawing a line through the negative. And it's not too hard to switch the positive to negative. So if you get the correct number but wrong sign, flip the signs and you got it. Questions on any of this here? Let's look at these last group here. Now, is there a greatest common factor for these here? But what is in front of the 4? Negative. What we can do is we can factor that negative out. If there was a greatest common factor, we would factor it out with the negative. But factoring that negative out is going to help keep these steps be the same. Because if we factor a negative out of negative 4x squared, we're left with 4x squared. It goes from negative to positive. If we factor a negative out of negative 8x, it becomes plus 8x. And if we factor a negative out of positive 5, we have negative 5. And factoring that negative out makes these a lot easier to work with. Now, before we move on, the reason that this is helpful is because if we left that negative in, the plus and minus, kind of how we do step 3, would be about the same, would be the exact same, except For the factors of 4x squared, we'd have to look at negative 4x squared. So we're looking at 1 and negative 4, or negative 1 and 4, or 2 and negative 2, or negative 2 and 2. We have to include all those cases. However, if we pull that negative out, we don't have to worry about that. We can just look at the factors of 4. Now, negative, just like with the first one where we dealt with the 8, the greatest common factor of 8, we had to keep it in the final answer. The same thing is true with the negative. Now, our signs, if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, they are. Doesn't matter where I put the plus and minus. No. So I normally just make the first one positive, second one negative. It doesn't matter. We could have had it in either order. Because again, the reason we don't have to worry about it is because we're going to check it in the end. Now, we can look at the factors of 4x squared. Well, we know one thing's going to go in the first ones, x and x. Now, if the x squared had been where the 5's at, the x would go in the third blank in each one. Now, the factors of 4. 1 and 4 or? Which one do we want to try first? Okay, 2 and 2. And the factors of 5 are? As we can plug them in and check. And this chapter it's really nice to use a pencil because we might have to erase. I'm going to throw a marker. 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. 1 times 2x is plus 2x. Negative 10x plus 2x is negative 8x. Is that what we wanted? Yep. Originally we wanted negative 8, but since we pulled the negative out, we need it to be positive. So we just need to flip the signs. So we get this here, which would tell us that we'd have positive 10x minus 2x is equal to 8x. And that's it. Any questions on any of this here? Do we need to see another example of one of these? Okay. So if y'all are feeling comfortable with these, I'm going to go on and give you the homework assignment. Which is going to be 3 through 10 and 11 through 29 odd. If y'all want to do those on 2 separate sheets of paper, you can. Because the 3 through 10 was from the first, what we were supposed to do Thursday. I want to still give you those extra problems, or not extra problems. I still want you to do those problems to get practice with these. Yes, they're the same thing. It's just more practice with them. Except most of those are going to have a greatest common factor, making the number in front of x squared 1. Or what we did today, a lot of it, that wasn't the case, because we had 1 and 4, or 2 and 2, or any other combination. You just see where it crosses the x-axis. So do 27. Do 27 instead of 29. Oh, 27's asking that too. So 24. Sorry. 23, yes. Because 25 is 23. We'll learn how to do those later. Sorry, so 23. I'll have to correct that for the other classes too. I thought I looked over those, but